and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing the Get to Know the Fantasy Reader book tag. I was tagged by Kelly Reads a Lot. If I can find the original creator of this tag, I will link them down below. I will also be linking down the people who I tagged to do this video, which is going to include Bad Witch Books, Ink and Fig, Portable Magic, Percy Does Everything, Beyond Bookish, Bookish Nisha, and Shelley's of Books. So I hope you do this tag. I'm really interested in what your answers would be. I specifically chose y'all because I have seen you talk about several fantasy books on your channel. So if anyone was going to be able to answer all of these questions, it would probably be y'all. So that's why I tagged you. Question number 1, what is your fantasy origin story? Basically, what kind of books got you into fantasy? So I don't really see, when I was growing up, a lot of fantasy books written for children that were high fantasy books. So there was a lot of low fantasy books, or I guess magical realism, where you're getting into the heads of like cats, dogs, or other animals. They're not really true high fantasy, but they definitely have either a magical element or where you are going off planet to somewhere else in an imaginary land. So yeah, if you're a stickler for fantasy, you're probably not going to like my answers, but I did the best that I could to actually have answers for this. So we're just going to go with it. And I am going to go with The Rats of Nim, which is about a family of mice who have to escape because the lawnmower keeps coming out and they're going to die if they don't relocate. So that's all I really remember about that story. I probably read it in 4th grade, so I don't remember a lot of the details. I think it would be a fun one to revisit that I would actually still enjoy as an adult. Another one is A Wrinkle in Time. I think I read this in 5th grade. Really liked it. It was more so on the side of like a fantasy, even though it does start in the real world, but the majority of the book is not taking place on Earth. It's taking place on like another planet. And they are searching for their dad who has been missing. And so they're thrust into this kind of like, I guess, sci-fi fantasy type world. So yeah, it was really interesting. And then of course The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, where kids go into the land of Narnia and there's talking animals and wicked witches and lions. Like there's a little bit of everything in that story, and I really liked that book. Also into adulthood, because when I was a teenager in high school, I was in the play a lot, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I wanted to be the Wicked Witch, but unfortunately I did not get that role, and I was like Panther number 3, but I went from having 3 scripted lines to having 6. So I was happy she gave me additional lines, because she didn't do that with anybody else. So I must have done a good job. And there was also this scene where you had to stay frozen in place for 5 minutes during the whole fighting battle towards the end. So I'm like front and center on the stage, and my legs are posed out, and I have like my hand like that up in the air, like claw about to strike when I get frozen. And I just stay like that for 5 minutes, and also try not to blink, or blink obviously, because everyone would be able to see me. But yeah, it was a fun experience, so I think I will always have some sort of kinship toward The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, since it consumed about 3 months of my life with rehearsal. Then we have number 2. If you could be a hero in a story, who would be the author, and what type of trope would you insist on? So this is going to be a controversial answer because the people that I've chosen are controversial people. However, if I'm being honest, they are the pairing that I would choose to do this, and I always keep it real with y'all here on this channel. Sometimes I delete videos afterward because I keep it a little too real, and I don't want to invite criticism and negativity my way. But I think I can chance it with this one because I am giving you the precursor that, you know, I agree that they've done some crappy things, but when it comes to writing, they kick butt, and that's why I'm going with Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman together. I don't want them writing it individually. I need them to pair up because they do really well with their sci-fi fantasy books, having a bit of romance and action in there, super fast-paced, and the main characters don't die. I don't want to die in the book. And then we've got number 3. What is a fantasy book you've read this year that you want other people to read? So I actually have 2. One is a standalone and one is a series. So the one is the Scarlet Princess. It's very fast paced. It definitely has your romance elements in there. There's also the travel elements where they're going from one territory to the next, and some life or death or life or enslaved situations that make it a super interesting series. So I think that you'll like that one. There's also a love triangle in it, but it's a love triangle where like you actually kind of have to figure out who you want to choose. And it's not necessarily a given until it's at the point where the character's also making the decision, and then you're like, okay, I agree with this character's choice. So I really like that series. Then I would also recommend Promises and Pixie Dust, which is a standalone Thumbelina retelling. So Thumbelina is about 3 inches tall, and she has been best friends with this full-sized human guy who has went off, and he is kind of going along with the huntsman. He is one of them, and he is doing bad things to serve this person that is in charge because he's been forced into that situation. Then Thumbelina decides that she wants to find people just like her, and there has always been legends of the fairies in the dark forest. So she is going to go into the dark forest even if he does not agree to help her. But they've always been friends, even though they've had some distance put between them the last few years once he has become a huntsman. So this is full of awkward situations. Does he love her? Does he not love her? Does she love him? Like, what is going on here? It has a bit of the forbidden love element, and not that they can't get together, but that if they do choose each other, they're not going to be doing everything that they would be able to do if they were both the same size. It was fun. There was also a Rumpelstiltskin character that I really liked having in there because he kind of was like her father, not father figure, but like her, well, yeah, kind of her father figure. He's like an uncle to her. And there's a lot of secrets and stuff that you don't know about. I had not read Thumbelina, the original stories before, so I didn't know exactly what to expect, but I was not let down. There's also some royalty that you get to see in this book, and lots of magical little things happening in the forest. So much fun, honestly. Anything by these authors. Both the series and the short story are by the same group of authors. I have read almost all of their books now, and all of them have been at least a 4-star for me, and I can be a bit tough when it comes to star ratings, so a lot of stuff gets 3 stars or below. I'm trying to do better, y'all. I'm trying to pick books that I know I will enjoy more often than just ones that wind up being okay. But we're going to go on into question number 4, which is, what is your favorite fantasy subgenre, and what is one you haven't read much from? Alright, so princess winds up with the pirate. I've read quite a few books that have this trope, and that's why it makes me like really like those books. Also, I do like the ordinary girl saves the world. There's a lot of the ordinary boy saves the world, but I don't see as many where that is the girl that's in that position. And then, of course, I love anything with a love competition. So, like the Selection series, which technically would be a sci-fi dystopian, but you can put that into a fantasy world. So I would love to see it in the fantasy world. And then, of course, we have magical high fantasy that isn't about fairies. I have no problem with high fantasy that is about fairies, but it's that is primarily what I have read. That's been high fantasy. So I would like to read some high fantasy, meaning there's no references to Earth. Humans did not come from Earth. There is no knowledge of Earth in existence. That is high fantasy to me. So like Harry Potter, that's urban fantasy. High fantasy, you're on a different planet. There's no Earth in that solar system. You have no knowledge of Earth and regular humans. That's high fantasy. So I want to read a high fantasy that doesn't have fae. I just want something a little different to go along with what I already have. And I definitely have a lot of the fae ones. So I just need a little something different. And then we have question number 5, which is, who is one of your to-buy fantasy authors? I'm going to go with Kate Marie on this one. She is my best friend. Also, she is my book editor, but she's also an amazing author. And when I read her book, I knew it was going to be good based off of the feedback that she gave me on mine when she was editing my stories. Like, I knew she had a good sense of how to write a story, and she delivers. She delivers. Not only does she write fantasy, but she also writes romance, and I think that that's excellent because she's able to take those skills and weave in a fantasy plot full of political intrigue, family drama, friendship, comedy, and action, along with some really heartfelt, ushy-gushy romances with some guys who may seem like they're the bad boy, but deep down they're big old cinnamon rolls, and that's what I get when I read Kate Marie books, so I would highly recommend checking out any and all of her books. They're amazing, and she does have more fantasy books coming out beyond the 4 books for the Nearest series that are already out. Her 5th one, which is a spin-off to the original Nearest series, comes out, I believe, on the 19th of November 2022, and there's going to be another book with that. So it's kind of like a duology spin-off, and it's the daughter and I think her brother's son who are the main characters for that in that spin-off. So really interesting. They are like fairy tale retellings, but in a high fantasy world where, again, Earth does not exist. So if you like yourself some high fantasy, you like a little bit of maybe some magical elements, but not like big magical elements. Like, it's not like Avatar where people are like bending objects and stuff, but there are curses and witches and all of that sort of thing. Then I think you'll really appreciate her world building in that series. Number 6, how do you typically find fantasy recommendations? So, number 1 is just going to be pretty covers. I can spot a fantasy cover when I see it. So if I see a fantasy cover, I'm going to be like, okay, if it's pretty and it's cheap, I might go ahead and buy it just based off of the cover. I'm just being honest with y'all. Also, there's a thing called also bots. So when you're looking on Amazon, you find a book that you already like, you can scroll down. There will be a whole section that says also bots, and it's going to be books that readers who have read the book you're looking at have also read those books in the also bots. So it's a really cool way to get easy recommendations without ever having to talk to anyone. And they tend to be of a similar price range as well. So if you're looking at a book that's currently on sale for $1.99, then a lot of your also bots are also going to be $1.99, because that's just how publishers do it. If you're doing it with traditional publishing, they're going to put some similar books all up on their like whole price reduction thing around the same time. It can be a dangerous way to get your books, because they'll do that for book 1 in the series, and then the next ones they never do promotions on, and they're like $9.99 a piece. But if they're an indie author and you catch one of those deals, go ahead and get it, because most indies will never price their book higher than $4.99 unless they are like the Jillian Dodds of the indie world, who are able to market themselves as traditionally published authors, even though they're not. So yeah, save some money, go indie, use the also bots. All right, and then also, if someone recommends the book, then I will probably look into it again if it is cheap, and if I am just in a reading mood for that. And booktube wrap-ups are a good way to find those if you're following channels that primarily read fantasy books. I do like to kind of look into the ones that are more obscure that I haven't seen on other people's booktube channels, rather than the ones that are on everybody's channel, because I feel like they have something unique about them that made that one reader gravitate toward it, and I like feeling like I'm ahead of the game. It's like if you were a Taylor Swift fan when she was doing country, you feel special because that's been like over 10 years now. So it's like, I was a fan first. I like to do that with books. I like to be a fan before the book becomes popular. That's just cool. So yeah, Number 7, upcoming fantasy release you're excited about. So the only one I know that I'm going to buy right now that's not out yet is Skyward number 4. I don't think it even has a title, so I'm just calling it Skyward number 4. Have I read Skyward number 3 or the standalone novellas that go with the series? Nope, I haven't. I own them. But I thought that it was going to end with Cytonic, and it does not. It actually has 5 books in the series. So, yeah, I'm like, okay, I might need to just hold off then until the 5th book comes out because I don't really care to reread all that much. Next up, we have question number 8, which is going to be another salty answer, but it's kind of in opposition to what I think people do say. I don't know, you'll see. Number 8. What is a misconception? Okay, keyword, misconception about fantasy you'd like to lay to rest. Okay, so this can be very, very true, I would say, for a lot of stuff written before the 80s. I'm just going to put it out there. Women have a hard time writing fantasy books, especially if it's like adult fantasy, and getting respect, because there tends to be a lot of the male audience and they just don't want to read books by female authors. And so you do get a lot of books before that became more in the norm for women authors to be doing it. And the things that the women authors have done for YA, you wonder why you have these books being marketed as YA when the characters are clearly mature adults and they're just switching the ages on them to market it to a YA audience. Is because the women do not get the respect that they deserve when they do it in adult fantasy. So they come to YA, mismarket their books intentionally so that they can get readers. And then eventually it winds up getting remarketed as new adult or just regular adult fantasy. Let's just look at Sarah J. Maas as an example, or even Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is what happens. It's not always their fault. It's the publishers doing it because they need to make the money. So yeah, but here's the misconception and the truth. When you talk about like incels, the incel fiction type people would love the thing that is a misconception, but also very true for some later literature. And that is that it's all written by old white men who love to overwrite their stories and use fancy language to make themselves feel superior. And thereby make the people who read it feel superior. Because they're like, oh, I read this super dense, boring book. So because I am able to dedicate 20 hours of my life to read this boring book with no substance and just a lot of fluffy filler words, I'm special. So yeah, that's my saltiness. But the thing is that though those books do exist, there are plenty of books that are not like that, including books that are written by male fantasy authors, like Brandy Sandy. Hello, love me some Brandy Sandy. So I'm just saying, women have made some changes to the world of fantasy in the past. Oh gosh, I wanted to say 20 years, but really it's been more like 40 years. I am getting old because when I think of the 80s, I think of it being 20 years ago, but it's not. It was 40 years ago. So I'm just saying, you know, like after the 80s, you had some people opening some doorways. And so that's not necessarily the case now. Look at your authors. All right? If they're young and they're happening, then they might not have these issues. I don't know. Is that ageist? Maybe. I just think sometimes people, if you've started writing and it works for you and you keep getting an audience and you have this dense books that should probably have like 200 pages sliced out of them, why would you change if your audience is like, yes, I want you to describe what the couch and what the couch looks like and what color the curtains are for 2 pages, because it makes them feel special to get through something so boring, because most people would just DNF. Anyway, I'm getting salty. Number 9, if someone that you know doesn't read a lot of fantasy and ask for a recommendation, what are the first 3 books that come to mind? I can't keep it to 3, and the truth is that some of these, again, are not true fantasy. If you're I can be a little snobby when it comes to genre distinctions, so like, I'm doing this because I'm like, urban fantasy is not fantasy, it's paranormal. Like, there's a difference, and it's okay. I love paranormal. But I am one of those, I like labels. I like things to fit in boxes. And so that's just how my brain feels comfortable. I guess it's part of my OCD. So it's like, if I know what box it goes into, I want to put it in that box. So I don't like when people put it in a different box than the one that I've put it in. But anyway, so yeah, it makes it so hard when I'm trying to figure out what certain books are that I own, because I'm like, okay, this book has no magic in it, but it is set on another planet. Or this book, they have mentioned Earth, so it's not really a high fantasy because Earth wouldn't exist in a high fantasy book. Or, oh, this is set on another planet for the entirety of the book, but 100 years ago, their ancestors landed from Earth onto this alien planet that has actual aliens, because again, it's their planet, they're not really aliens, but it has aliens on the planet that they land on, and they have like recolonized certain sections of it to be their own. And so it's like, okay, it's a fantasy, but there's no magic in it. So even though it's on another planet, it's not really fantasy because there's no magic and they're not from there. So it could be like contemporary type fantasy style where there's no magic, but it's on another planet and Earth doesn't exist. But if it is from people that originally descended from Earth that have come and like colonized this area, it's not a really high fantasy. So I'm like, where does that leave it? And I'm like, oh, it's sci-fi because it's futuristic. So if it's set in the future and we've colonized another planet, it's therefore sci-fi. So yeah, figuring out whether something is sci-fi fantasy or sci-fi fantasy or urban fantasy or contemporary fantasy where it's not urban fantasy. Whoo, there's so many distinctions with the genre, it just blows my mind. But anyway, yeah, so yeah, some of these are not going to fit into distinct boxes or even technically fit under to the snobbery that I do tend to feed into when it comes to sci-fi, not sci-fi, when it comes to fantasy and being like, okay, this is not high fantasy, so some people who might be a little snobby about the genre are not going to agree with me, but I don't care. Why I went into like a weird Kermit the Frog voice, I don't know, y'all. I'm weird. That's just the sort of thing that I do on this channel. But anyway, all that aside, I am going to pick Graceling by Kristen Cashore. Really enjoyed this one. It gave me Quest to Camelot vibes, even though I don't recall there being dragons in this book, but it did give me Quest to Camelot vibes. So if you like that one, you should check it out. There is romance. There is a character who is a main character who is blind. He kicks butt. He's a warrior. Love to see it. Love that there is an adventure going on in here. It's not necessarily a fast-paced adventure, but they are like moving through different territories and there's danger around every bend. And there's false identities and secret royals and all sorts of things that I just really love. However, I gave Graceling a 5-star. I gave Fire, which is the second book, a 2-star. I just really did not like it. 2 was probably better than what I would give it now. I'd probably give it a 1 and DNF it. But anyway, I didn't like number 2. And number 3 is Bitter Blue, which I think I might have enjoyed more had I not listened to the audiobook. But also, had I not listened to the audiobook, I probably would have DNF'd because it just took too long to do anything. It was very much so more political and less romance. And when it comes to me, I'm a romance girly and I need some romance in the books. And I need that to be like a center focus. And it's not in those books, so I didn't like them the way that I loved Graceling. I'm just being honest. Okay, so yeah, I don't recommend the rest of the series. Maybe Winterkeep is good. Maybe the Sparrow whatever 5th book that's coming out is good. It might be. I don't know. If I win like a giveaway of it or something and I get the gorgeous new covers that they've come out with, they are gorgeous, then I might give one of those a chance since I have read the previous 3 books. But, like, I'm not just going to go grab a 500, 600 page book where I've hated or not really cared about the rest of the series. So I don't think I'm going to be continuing that series. But, yeah, book 1, Graceling, top tier, amazing. You should try it. Then also Daughter of the Pirate King. It's fast paced, it's fun, there's romance, there's a girl who's the daughter of the Pirate King, and there is a pirate. There's some deception. She has some abilities that she's not telling people about, and she kind of has to keep them in disguise. She's also like the only woman that winds up on the ship. She gets herself intentionally captured by pirates, okay? I really liked her. I really liked him. I liked the romance. And it was fast paced. And I believe it was in first person. So like first person present tense, yes. Give me some. Then I'm also going to go with a bit of a slower pace when it comes to the first like 200, maybe even 300 pages, but then takes off, and it has kind of like a cyberpunk fantasy type world, and that is going to be the Dragons of Nova series by Elise Kova. Now, I will say that when I tried to read this book, I got about 200 pages into the ebook, and I was like, this ain't for me. I'm bored. I don't know what's going on. I'm done. Then I met Elise Kova, and she was so nice. She was so nice. She gave me the disc for Dragons of Nova to listen to the audiobook to see if it would change my mind. And it did. It definitely did. So basically, I had stopped reading right when the action starts happening, and if I had just held out for like 2 more chapters, I would have got to the good part. So yeah, romance. There's also bisexual rep. Even though they don't technically use titles on this planet, I talked with her, and she's like, well, if you were going to label it, it would be like this. And then I believe one of the sidekick females is either, I can't remember exactly what the sidekick female was, but she's definitely on the LGBT spectrum. And yeah, I really liked the series, even though it had that slow start. It was definitely worth reading the rest of it. Then I'm going to say Cinder. And so this is like a fairy tale retelling Cinderella story, and then it goes all the way to stuff happening in space and like ships and AIs and androids and all this other kind of cool stuff. You've probably heard and seen about the series plenty of times, but yeah, I will still recommend it. It was one of the first YA fantasy books that I read, and I was reading it while I was in the military on the ship, probably like the month before I got out of the service. So this would have been in 2012. So again, I felt so cool having read the first book before the series became super popular in like 2015 when everyone was talking about it. So yeah, Cinder. My favorite book in the series, I would say, is probably Scarlet. I liked that couple the best. I liked Scarlet maybe the best out of all of them. Yeah, and I don't have any hate for Ferris either. I actually thought it was a really cool origin story for the villain. So yeah, I enjoyed that series. I only read Cinder physically. I think I listened to all of the rest of them except for Ferris. I think I read Ferris physically on audiobook. But yeah, so I think the audiobook is good, but I also think just like the writing itself is really good. It's easy to get into. She kind of goes with like the standard 8th grade level. Which is what I strive to do when I write my own books, so that they're more approachable for people. Because most people do not go beyond an 8th grade reading level, and that includes college graduates, by the way. So, yeah, I don't like pretentious writing. I like writing that's very easy to read. It's concise, it gets to the point, and I feel like she does that well. So, yeah. Also, I have on here Under the Never Sky. I really enjoy this series, and I like the love interest as well. Now that I'm thinking about it, there may be some age difference there, but I'm not quite sure. It's hard for me to get into age differences now where one of them is a minor, just because I had conversations with people that kind of like, I don't know. I'm still working on it, like separating fiction from real world scenarios. So I don't know if that one had the age gap or not. But now that I think of it, he does feel slightly older. Not old, but like maybe he's 20 and she's 16, something like that. This is a different world. I would say if you hated Ready Player One, but you liked the idea of the Oasis and would like to see it done differently and not surrounded by a bunch of 80s references, then you should definitely check out Under the Never Sky. She lives in a dome protected by the elements outside, which include this kind of like electricity through the lightning that's very dangerous and can kill you and makes it to where people don't want to live outside. That's why they're in the domes. And they have this like ocular device that goes over their eye, and it is just like the Oasis in that she can be like, okay, I want to go to the theater and sing on stage, and she can go do karaoke on a theater stage through her Oculus. So they are in this little bitty dome, but it feels like they have endless adventures because of the world of the Oculus. But then, of course, in book one, she winds up getting outside of the Oculus. There is definitely a bad guy villain in this story, and there's lots of secrets about her own past that she is not aware of. Another cool thing to note about this series, which might seem really weird to point out, but that I always do because I just liked it, was the fact that she gets her period in the book. She gets her period. I love it, love it, love it when characters get their period or have to go use the bathroom, because you don't normally see it in books, and that's just so completely unrealistic to me that I am just wowed anytime I see bodily functions mentioned in books. I'm like, thank you for being realistic. This actually adds to the drama. Think about it. If you are like being tied up to a horse and you are having to go across the desert or something, yeah, that's extreme. Like, the horse could take off and then your body's going to be dragged behind it. Like, that's pretty extreme. But imagine being tied up to the horse and you need to pee. Okay? That adds another element of tension. I think it's realistic, and it's also something that all of us have experienced, the moment of needing to pee and being in a situation where you couldn't go do it. So, yeah, I think it just adds to it, and I want to see that in more books. So, yeah. It's also really funny because she's been in this dome where they've kind of taken away that so women don't experience periods. They like have a way to stop that because they see it as just like this useless thing. Unless you're like, I guess, ready to procreate, then maybe they would turn it on for you to be able to do that. I'm not quite sure. It's been a while since I've read the series. But the guys that she meets that live on the outside, you know, they're around women that have their periods. So they're traveling with her to this territory. So it's only her and two guys this whole time when they're traveling. I'm not really spoiling anything, y'all. This is like the beginning of the book, okay? This is not significant information. But, anyway, she thinks that she's dying, which I think is a common occurrence in situations where people don't talk about periods. And this even happens, like, my mom's sisters and stuff experienced this, where they started their periods very young. Like, one of my aunts started when she was 8 years old. So she didn't know what was happening. Yeah, so it was like, what is going on? And sometimes people do think you're dying if you start really young. But anyway, so they're having to explain to her, like, you're not dying, you're okay. And then they're, like, trying to help her out, which is kind of embarrassing. But it's like the one time where mansplaining is acceptable because she literally does not know what is happening to her. So they're having to settle her fears. And it was just cute. It was cute for men to not see this natural bodily function from a woman as being disgusting and dirty and to be avoided. So it was very period positive with men. So yeah, I'm just like, hey, I like this. And then I'm also going to go with the Defy series. Now, this does have, in the third book, there's a little bit of issue when it comes to vanity and tying your self-worth to how you look, which can be very hard for someone who has learned to accept themselves that maybe has facial deformities, and it might bring up issues for you if there was a time in your life where maybe you didn't feel confident about yourself because of like a facial deformity. So I would say be aware of that if that's the case for you. But otherwise, the series is just really good. There are some trigger warnings in the fact that they do capture women from territories that they've taken over and use them in a brothel to produce male children that will become soldiers for their kingdom. So yeah, lots of little, not little, like they're triggers. So lots of triggers in this story. But there is also a woman disguised as a man because she has a twin brother. So he's like, when those soldiers come to their lands, and they kill everyone and they take the women to be part of this brothel, um, and the boys to be soldiers. They were hiding behind under like a floorboard or something like that. So when they leave and there's like the male bodies are like burning on a fire pit. Trigger warnings, okay? Trigger warnings. Like burning on a fire pit, he goes over there with her and cuts off her hair and's like, from now on, you're my brother. And so instead of being Alexandra, she becomes Alex. And it's her only way to protect herself to not be put into the brothel. So then they're in the kingdom, and she is up to being the prince's guard. And the prince's life has been at risk. People have tried to capture him toward the beginning of the book. So the king's really worried about it. And she gets chosen to be his personal guard, which means she has to share his bedroom with him to keep him safe. And of course, that's going to cause a lot of tension because she's a woman. She's like, okay, I'm having to strap everything in. And so it's like, binding can be very uncomfortable. So she's like, when can I take this thing off so that I can relax? I was like, I can't imagine, because just wearing a bra that fits properly, there's a sense of relief when finally getting to whip that sucker off. So if you are like, a big boobed woman and you're having to bind, getting to take that off would probably feel like a bit of a relief. So yeah. So she's, and then the bad things happen in like the first chapter that set off the adventure. So it's just a fun one. If you like books where a girl is having to be disguised as a boy, and then of course they start to have feelings for one of the guys, and they're like, oh no, I'm deceiving him. What am I supposed to do? So like, if you like Mulan, if you like She's the Man with Amanda Bynes, it's one of my favorite movies. Anything like that, if you like that trope, I think you'll really like this series. And then we have The Innocent Mage. If you like the show Merlin and you thought that Arthur and Merlin should have got together because they had such great chemistry, then you will probably have the same feelings about The Innocent Mage. But sorry to disappoint, they do not wind up together, and it kind of like ruined the duology. It didn't ruin it. Like, it was an amazing duology, but like I had shipped these two characters together the whole time, and then to find out that they don't get together, I was disappointed, to say the least, okay, because they had all the makings of an amazing relationship, and it just didn't happen, and so I'm sad. And then last but not least, I'm going to go with the Throne of Glass series. It's one where the books may be a little bit chunky, but they were easy to get through. I've not finished the entire series, so I can only recommend Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, and Crown of Midnight. And I've read like 200 pages of the Heir of Fire, and I didn't know how long the series was going to continue, so I was like, I'm just going to wait until they're all out. Because I think when I was getting into it, everyone was getting excited because I think it's like Queen of something. Queen of Air and Darkness. No, that sounds like a different person's book. Anyway, the Queen one, the Red Book, was coming out. So I was kind of late to the bandwagon, and I just couldn't keep up with those huge books. And I was like, I'm waiting until it's over. Anyway. So yeah, and then that brings us to number 10, which is who is the most recent content creator that you want to shout out. And those were the people that I had tagged. So I will say their names again. Bad Witch Books, Ink and Fig, Portable Magic, Percy Does Everything, Beyond Bookish, Bookish Nisha, and Shelley's of Books. So all of those channels if you like some fantasy. And I hope that you will do the tags. So yeah, let me know any of your answers to these questions down below. I have all of the questions and my answers right here because I decided why not be on the ball. I do tend to ramble, and I'm the kind of person where I just chuck the whole video and start over from scratch to do it in one go. So this whole video was done in one take, and when I edit, I'll just put in the book covers and call it a day. So I'm not going to have to take out any chunks. But yeah, so I was like, I'm going to write them down, And I also have put myself on the mission of filling this entire notebook, which is 110 pages, by the end of the year. And I started it in October. So that was my goal, because I have a lot of notebooks and I don't use them enough. And I am such a perfectionist. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put my tags in here and I'm going to be really thoughtful. And also it's a way for, eventually, if I die before my loved ones, then they can like read these. They'll know how I felt about books. They'll know what my answers were to different questions. It's just like leaving behind my legacy in a book. And I think that that's so cool, because you never know when you're going to go. And if someone passed away on me that I really loved, I would want to have something of them that I could connect to. So that's the purpose of my bullet journals now, is to leave behind that legacy. So that's what I'm doing. Of course, there's regular stuff like charts and things that wouldn't mean anything to anyone but me. But I'm also doing book reviews and thoughts on the books that I'm reading. And they're just extremely honest and include things that I might not put in a review for the world to see. So yeah, it's cool. It's me. It gives me a way to express myself without judgment. I still got to put in the book covers, but yeah, so it's just really cool. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm going to be recording some more of these because I have lots more tags to do. So yeah, let me know if you like it with a thumbs up, or subscribe if you haven't already, and share with friends. That's honestly the best way to help support my channel, is to just share my channel with someone new. And to leave comments, because comments are my validation. Because I'm like, oh, someone enjoyed this, yay. That's all I've got for you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.